want to talk about something that I've struggled with for a long time, but I'm going to talk more in depth as time goes in other videos. But many of my friends know that I have struggled a lot with my faith and my belief in God and trusting God. I didn't grow up in a religious home, but I grew up going to church, and there was a lot of religious abuse, spiritual abuse, really skewed my view about God. But as an adult, I've gone back and forth with my faith. But the last couple of years, almost couple of years, I've really contemplated more about my faith and how God has been in my life. And this past week is just another example of how God has protected me. So my daughter had a flight in Atlanta, Georgia, and she lives in Birmingham where she's going to school. So Monday night I drove 2 hours south to her apartment to stay the night because we're going to leave super early in the morning to drive to Atlanta. And from there, my plan was to drive to Tampa to help a cousin who has been sick. And I knew that she really needed me. So I planned my trip around my daughter's flight. So we left 3:15 our time in the morning, Tuesday morning, to head to Atlanta. Things were fine. Thank God, we didn't encounter any issues except for a period of heavy rain. So we got to the airport, and we caught up with her friend who was flying overseas with my daughter. So I left them there when I knew that they got checked in, and then I headed back on the road to head south. And I was about a half hour south of the airport on I-75, and I was in the outside lane trying to get ahead of another slower moving vehicle when suddenly something got kicked out from another vehicle, and I did not have any time to react. But I ran over it with both tires. I could feel it throughout the entire underneath of my car, and I knew right away I had at least one flat tire. So thankfully, I looked behind me and to the side, and I had a lot of space to get way over to the outside lane, and I was disabled on the side of the road. And there was a camper that was towing a trailer who was a few yards ahead of me. He also ran over something and had a flat tire. So then when I looked closer at my car, I had 2 flat tires on the passenger side, and there was no way that I could get anywhere with just one spare tire. So thankfully I had AAA. So I'm going to go back to, on my way that night before driving to my daughter's apartment, I had originally planned to take her car because it's smaller and much more fuel efficient. But as I was driving to her apartment, I was just really thinking about if I tried to take my cousin somewhere who she is disabled, if I tried to take her somewhere for a day, for a few hours outside of the rehab where she's at, I wouldn't be able to get her into my daughter's small car and get her out. So I figured my vehicle, which sits higher, would be better. So when I got to the apartment, I told my daughter we're just going to take my car. Also, I didn't really feel like transferring my stuff from my vehicle to her car. So that's one thing that I think it might be a God thing, because just something in my gut told me that I needed to take my vehicle. And so anyway, when I became disabled on I-75 and had both 2 tires that were completely destroyed, I called AAA. And this is another thing. I had considered dropping AAA because I had not used it. I've had it for a few years and had not used it. And so I was like, well, maybe maybe I don't need it, but I didn't drop it, thank God. I had AAA plus. And so they, about an hour, almost an hour and a half after this incident happened, they showed up with a flatbed tow truck and towed my car to back to Walmart Auto Care Center, which is about 10 miles back the other way from where I came from. And because I had a roadside protection plan on it. So we get over there, and when we got to Walmart, they unloaded my car, and I took my dog stroller out because I knew we were going to be sitting in the store. Thank God I brought that with me. And then I went to the passenger side to get something that was out of the back seat. And as I stepped on the side running board on that side, I noticed that it gave way, and it was really loose. So I mentioned it to the one mechanic. I guess he didn't make note of it. So while I'm sitting there waiting for them to change the tires out of my car, they called me wanted to show me something on my car. And when they showed me the running board was really loose, and I said yes. I pointed that out to the other guy. So they looked underneath it, and whatever I ran over just knocked the bolts off of this running board, sheared them off, and the running board was just sitting there. And so the one guy kind of played with it a little bit, and when he pulled at it, it came right off. If they had not taken the time to notice that, and they just changed the tires and sent me on my way, that running board potentially could have just gone flying off while I was driving on the interstate. So that's another way that I think that God was looking out for me. But when I going back to my daughter's car, when I ran over that item, whatever it was big enough and heavy enough, I guess, that it did cause some damage to one of my rims. Thankfully, it didn't affect putting the tire on, but it definitely caused some obvious damage, cosmetic damage on it. But when the tow truck driver, when he was talking to me as we took my car to get serviced, we just got to talking. I told him about my daughter, and about how I almost drove her car. And when he asked what kind of car it was, I told him. He says, "Oh yeah, you would have had way more damage and potentially even worse." And I thought of that. I thought that because her car sits much lower and it is much smaller, so that was definitely a God thing that I just something in my gut told me I needed to take my vehicle, which was larger. So once I got on the road, I had another 6.5 to 7 hour drive. So I was by this point I'm already 5 hours behind, and so I was going to get to my destination much later, and I had already had no sleep for over 24 hours, and I had to keep praying that I would stay awake. And I considered pulling over at a rest stop to rest, but I was really trying to push to get to my destination before it was too late. I didn't want to get to my friend's house super late. I wanted to get into bed. And so there were a few times where I probably should have pulled over because the fatigue really started to set in. But once I got to my friend's house, where I usually stay, and I got my stuff in, we talked for a few moments, and then I went to do my daily Bible reading, got through that, and laid in bed, and I went straight to sleep. And I have insomnia, and I usually don't sleep more than 4 or 5 hours at a time, and that night I slept over 9 hours, so I really needed that. But I got up that morning, Wednesday morning, and I first thing I did was get ready and um, drove out to Tampa to see my cousin, and she actually looks a lot better than I was actually expecting. She went through a real trial a couple weeks ago. She was really sick and had 4 surgeries back to back, and and then ended up with another infection. But by the grace of God, she is doing so much better. So I'm here to help her get some things taken care of, and here's my dog Joey, and I will be heading back next week. My daughter comes back home next week, and I'll be leaving that morning and driving up through Atlanta to pick her up and take her home to her apartment in Birmingham, and then I'll head home, probably stay there tonight and then head home the next day. But really, just really made me think about how God really was watching over me through this whole trip. I was beginning to wonder if I was supposed to make the trip with everything happening and the additional expense that's going into it, because right now we really can't spare another huge expense after having to pay for $2,000 for a new part for our AC. But everything will work out the way it should, and I really appreciate those who pray for my cousin to continue to get better and stronger. She does have a disability that limits her mobility, but she is important to me, and she's very special to me. She and I and her siblings have a lot in common. We've gone through a lot together, so we have, a bond with that. So anyway, thank you for listening, and have a great day.